There's a lot happening with New Jersey's child welfare system. We want to help you make sense of it and share our story. This is DCF On The Air.
This is DCF On The Air, and I'm Jason Bukowski. In the last several years, and really over the course of probably 2 decades, we've been trying to transform our system in substantial ways in order to better support families as intact family units, as whole units. If you look at the numbers over the last 20 years, in 2003 we had something like 13,000 children in out-of-home placement. Today that number is about 3,000. So what happens to those other 10,000 families? Do we just not provide services at all? Well, that's not the case. Through DCF, we provide a host of services and supports to families to keep them safely together, to help them navigate any challenges that they're experiencing, and if an out-of-home placement does happen, to bring them back together, to help them heal and reunify. Joining me today are members of the DCF Office of Family Preservation and Reunification. This office was created in July of 2021 to oversee a large array of services, and some of those services are just getting off the ground. So we're excited to talk to them today, and I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Daniela Guarda. I'm the Assistant Director in the Office of Family Preservation and Reunification Services.
And I'm Wendy Sergnes. I'm the Administrator in the Office of Family Preservation and Reunification Services, overseeing the family preservation programs as well as our in-home family support programs.
Hi, and I'm Teray Freeman. I'm the other administrator in the Office of Family Preservation and Reunification. I oversee our visitation programs as well as our adolescent services in our office. Thank you.
Well, Daniela, Wendy, and Teray, welcome to DCF On The Air.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So to begin our conversation today, I'd ask if you could describe the continuum of services that are available for visitation and preservation services that might be available to families that are either at risk of an out-of-home placement or maybe already experiencing an out-of-home placement.
Sure. So I can get us started, and then I'll kick it over to my colleagues. So as you started our, talk, many of these services are still sort of in process, right, of launching. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is really the vision of what that vision is and how we're going to get there. So when we think about our preservation services, the charge of our office was to really think about what are those in-home family support services that we learned are most important to our families in need through the Commissioner's Listening Tour and needs assessments. And we actually did speak to families as we were exploring and developing, right, what that continuum will look like. So we could talk a little bit about what some of those programs look like. And then for our reunification services, we're excited that we're in the process of launching a new statewide supportive visitation services model. That is our family time parent-child visitation approach that will be available statewide.
So I want to focus on something that you just said about the supportive visitation services, because I know that right now we're looking to procure those services statewide, but those are services that had been in place at DCF before. We had piloted those in a couple different counties. And I'm wondering, there's a lot of services that we're in the process of procuring, and there's a lot of services that maybe had existed prior to the creation of the Office of Family Preservation and Reunification. I got there. You guys don't have an acronym. We need to work on that.
DCF, OFPR.
Yeah, OFPR. Okay, but I think that makes you like DCF official.
Yeah.
The acronym. But I'm wondering, what's the mix of the services that are new to the department, that we're procuring brand new out of the box, versus those ones that we have a little bit of experience with, versus those ones that have been, part of our continuum for years and years and years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point, DCF has been doing this for years, right? We've been in the business of sort of having an in-home family support continuum for a long time, right? We already have home visiting programs and supportive visitation services and other services that are intended to meet the needs of families where they are. I think with this office, the difference was really to think about some of our child welfare services and how do we build those into our family support continuum, and where do they fall right in that continuum. And so it was really intentional about what already exists. And so, like I said, we had home visiting, our furthest primary prevention, as well as secondary. We already know we have FPS services. And so our goal was to take a look at the data, some of the information that we learned from the commissioner's listening tour, what families were saying. We ourselves in our office had an opportunity to speak to a number of families to hear directly, right? What do they want, right, from services? They don't always need a service, right? So what would that look like? And so that sort of set us on this journey of identifying different models, different supports that meet varying needs, that have different levels of intensity, that take into account culture and, different populations and supports, right? And some of the models that we identified, the support was really focused on, a particular caregiver, maybe on a particular child, but all in service to helping families to meet their goals, right? To keep their children in their homes, right? That was really the purpose of our preservation sort of scan. And we're in the process right now of launching many of those programs. And so we're excited today to tell others, right, a little bit more about what we've started and sort of what's coming.
Great. Now, Wendy, the Family Preservation Services, that's one of the things that you're focused on.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for a family that's, DCEF involved? Like, how do they access those services, and are those services available while they're, maybe have an open case with DCP&P? Do they have those services afterwards as well?
So FPS has been New Jersey's trusted service when it comes to a family who's in crisis. So that can happen really at any point of an open, involved case with Child Protective Services. So the caseworker is the referent to the program, and the family really should meet certain criteria because that's what the program is designed to do. So if the family is high risk, very high risk as determined by the structured decision-making tools, then or you could have a family who has a safety protection plan. Those are families who are really going to maximize the use of the program and really benefit from the stabilization services that come with that. So it's a short-term, intensive program between 5 hours and 20 hours a week in the home. Or, they can meet the family outside of the home to really meet the needs of that family. Library, school settings, board social services, things like that.
Great. Tori, the visitation services component of this. This is for families that, we did a safety assessment, determined that it's not safe for the family to stay together, but we have a case goal of getting them back together. That's our goal for all families. If there's an out-of-home placement, we try to get them back together as much as possible. How do visitation services support that goal of reunification? How are we helping families get to that point?
That's a great question. So, as you said, when we're talking about visitation, we have just launched an RFP, right? Mm-hmm. That is making our services more unified across the whole state. So we have supportive visitation that's launching. And then one good thing it's several good things, but one of the best things about SVS is that now every visitation provider across the state will look the same. They'll offer the same services for the family, and they'll really help to push toward that reunification with those services. So when we're thinking about those services, all of the providers are going to go along a continuum. So they have an array of services that could be available for the family. They could start with therapeutic services, therapeutic visitation services for the family, where they have a clinician there with them during that visit to really help the family. Because when they need a higher level of service, it's that need that the family have to keep that family bond together and to give them the support that they need. And on that continuum, they can go down to supportive visitation, where they'll have that coaching and modeling from that support. They wouldn't be a clinician anymore, but they have what they need still there. Then it could transition to supervised or unsupervised visit. But the best thing about it is that no matter where you are in the state, you're going to have the same type of services available for you. And with that, those services can be in the home, it could be in the community. It's really to help the family to remain just that, a family. And the visitation services really are supporting our families with that.
And I think we're moving towards an evidence-based model too, correct?
Yes. So part of what SVS, we're asking that they'll have an evidence-based curriculum as a part of it when they're working with their families. And our office will definitely be monitoring that. And we found, right, because this SVS was piloted in a few counties. And so from the data that we received and all the information that we were able to receive, we realized that this is something that really works. And when you find something that really works, and if you have all of the services that the family need in one spot, and you don't have to have therapeutic here and then go here for another visit, it's all there for the family. We have seen that reunification can happen a little quicker.
Great. And I know, from all that all three of you have been talking about, that this is adaptive in that we're meeting families where they are, where their needs are, that we're listening to families about what they need, but at the same time, it's also consistent because, the expectation is if you're coming in Cape May, if you're coming in Bergen County, this service should look the same. Adaptations for the family's needs, but it should be the same service regardless of how you're accessing it.
Right.
And to that point, Jason, that's the goal, that's the vision really for all of the services in our office, is thinking about equitable access, right? A family shouldn't have to choose, right, based on what's available in their area, which service they're going to receive, right? They should be able to have a choice based on the whole continuum of services that are in that area. And part of that choice is obviously what they're eligible for, but nonetheless, right, that whole portfolio of services should be available to every family regardless of where they reside in the state, and not contingent on what sort of is already existing in that particular area.
Yeah. And I think it's also, this idea of the families are the experts in what they need. So we know that. Mm-hmm. But they may not be the experts in the programs that are available. Or, we're not asking them to be able to, put forward an evidence-based model.
That's right.
They don't know what's available, but they know what they need. And we know what's available, but we don't know what they need. So this is really a partnership between families and the system to stabilize them and then to build stronger families.
That's right. And that was very much part of it, identifying models that would do just that, right? We expect that the model developers that we bring on board and the models that we're hoping to stand up across the state, they've proven to work, right? They have positive outcomes, and that's why they're an evidence-based or evidence-informed model. But it was also important for us to choose models that are adaptable here in New Jersey, knowing the culture and language and some of our needs, right, that families have, even in terms of transportation. So we could talk a little bit about that and how we've made some modifications, right, to our programs to attend to those things. But we really it was important for us to select models and work with model developers that had that same value, right, and their models will be tailored, right, to meet the individual needs of families over time. And so it's really the development of a family system approach, right, and making sure that family is the center of that, and that even for workers, right, for CPNP workers, they need to understand what the programs are and what the expectations are, and where families would benefit the most from those services, but ensuring that we have those services available across the entire state will also make their jobs, right, a lot easier.
You had a couple interesting things that you said there, and I wanted to kind of touch on those. You talked about how, as a system, we're kind of pivoting towards how do we support families. and making these supports for families. And I know that when we look at I believe your office, OFPR.
Start doing that.
We gotta start socializing that.
Yeah,
But it sits within family and community partnerships, correct?
that's correct.
Yeah. And when you think about the work of the department and what the different divisions are sort of responsible for, family and community partnerships is really more of a prevention services.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy and Teray, I know that you both have experience in the DCP&P local offices. Daniela, were you ever in the local office as well?
No, I came right from the community.
So, but having both of you have that sort of DCP&P caseworker experience, I'm wondering, because it sounds like a lot of the services that we offer through your office are kind of bridging the gap between what we would consider to be like a prevention model, where we're preventing it, versus protective, where we're now we're intervening when something happens. And I'm wondering, are these services, where do you see them fall within that spectrum? Because it really is a spectrum. It's not that any one service is all prevention, all protective. There's a component of both, because families have complex needs. It's not, we can't typify them as, okay, everything's in this bucket versus that bucket. So I'm wondering how you see the services that you're offering through your office as, where does it fall within that line?
I think it's really a combination of both for many of our in-home programs. So definitely coming from the field, I feel lucky that we have this opportunity to just enhance the services that are available to families. Again, coming from the field, that ability to prevent feels so valuable. Many of the families come into Child Protective Services, either something has happened, right? And so then those, a service like FPS is protective in many ways, right?
Yeah.
Really reducing safety issues that are the family's experiencing. But then they're also preventing the repeat maltreatment that can happen, right? And so really having this array of services feels like just the perfect combination for families and CPMP workers to be able to provide to their families, right? When the cases come in, we want to be able to be helpful. And so knowing that we have FPS available for those really high need families, but then also some of our newer programs really meeting needs in more of a preventative capacity.
Great. And then this idea of a shift from, because I think sort of the historic view of child welfare is child focused. We have to care for the safety of the child. That's paramount to everything that we do. And that's important. I don't want to minimize the importance of that. But it's also taking sort of a larger, broader view of, the children are supported when the family is supported. And, thinking about the services that we offer, how are we embodying that vision for supporting the entire family? It's basic, I guess, where the services are available to the family, but I wonder, how does that kind of connect to the larger vision of our shift as a system?
For me, with Visitation, so I was fortunate enough to be in one of the counties where SVS was piloted originally. And just having that perspective of knowing that this is something that's going to benefit our families and help them, and knowing that if it's available to all families, if I had this available to me when I was a worker, I'm sure some of my families were reunified sooner because they had everything. And the services, as you said, it's really about keeping that family intact. And although the children are in out-of-home care, when they're connected to SVS, the service provider they're doing everything in their power to make sure that that family connection is still there by doing the visits, doing them in the setting that's most comfortable for them. But then the added part to that is doing this aftercare component of being involved with the family even after reunification happens. We didn't have that before. So having that added in now, I think is really going to make a difference for the families that we service, to really just help them with the connection to different community providers and stakeholders. Because, if you think about when the children are in care, the families are separated. And so now as they're coming back together, they've come back together in this unit of visitation. And then they come back together in their home to have an added support. I think it'll be beneficial to those families, and it'll help with that, keeping them intact, working towards their reunification. And it supports on that preventive end, it does support all of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you talked about evidence-based, and that these programs are proven to help families. And we see that in, reduced time to reunification. We can say families that have this, they reunify faster.
Right.
What are some of the other benefits that we're seeing for families? Because beyond just the reunification, that's we're complying with our requirements, and families are coming back together. But what else are we seeing from this?
I really think that this ties into also your last question around really like the family as a whole. With some of these services, they go in place to reduce the entire family stressor, right? So if those parents are experiencing difficulty, grief, loss, financial challenges, those have an impact on the entire family unit, right? If I come home from work really having brought that stress home with me, that impacts how my family is going to function maybe that day and for the coming days out of that. So these services really are designed to attend to the stressors. Part of what some of our new programs are, those outcomes really are seeing in reduction in maternal stress, reduction in maternal depression and anxiety, increased parental knowledge. So those are some of the proven benefits of these evidence-based programs.
Fantastic. When we talk about the services that are offered, and we've referenced a few times this continuum of services, it's not just one single program or a series of programs, but it's an array and it's a continuum. I'm wondering, how do families move through that continuum? Like if you come in at the family preservation services level, what other, are you moving to other services or other programs within that, or maybe it's not necessary?
That's a great question. It's an interesting question because I can see when we talk about SVS, we talk about it on a continuum, and we expect families to be able to move through that continuum. Maybe a little bit different than our in-home family support continuum, in that the hope is that families complete the programs in entirety, right? And by completing the program and achieving the goals of that program, no one leaves perfect, right? But you've learned a set of skills, right? You've learned you have routines perhaps in place. You've mitigated, right, whatever the stressors, right, as much as we can were or are. And then you can apply those learned lessons and skills over time, right? And so we wouldn't necessarily, want families to have to be in a service forever, right? That's also not our intention. And so the purpose of an evidence-based program is that there's an end date, right? There's a designated time that a family is involved in the program and an intensity level and goals that they should achieve. And when they accomplish those goals, the program should end, right? And our hope is that the case will close, right? And then families can move on as a family unit. Not to say that they won't ever have other stressors, but hopefully they have tools, right, to be able to mitigate those in the future and not have to come back. And so we wouldn't necessarily expect them to move through. And I think, to Wendy's point around, FPS and some of our other services is that, we've always been so child specific. And so our programs absolutely will focus on the needs of that child or the particular children, especially some of our, teens. And I'm even thinking of our new Breach Strategic Family Therapy program that we're, hoping to launch relatively soon. The focus is really on the needs, right, of what that that child is, whether it's substance use or mental health, but it's really the family unit, to Wendy's point. Really, what's going on in terms of the parent's substance use or the parent's mental health or the parent's stressors that we need to focus on, right, to help that child, right, with their coping or to overcome some of their stressors that they're experiencing. So it's not really focusing on what's wrong with the particular child, really, but how do we support the whole family as a unit?
Yeah.
It makes me think of really so much of the work that has happened in DCPMP over the years about really identifying what does a family need? Like, what are they experiencing at that moment in collaboration with the family and matching services, right? Not just after many years with the division, right? Like, not just like, okay, they need to go to parenting class, like really identifying a specific need, really sorting out what those individual issues are, family issues, and landing on like what could benefit that family. And so when they're matched to a service, that service hopefully accomplishes the need. There is some space for FPS as the most intensive service is short term. It's designed to be that way purposefully. So there is space for if they need a particular follow-up service that definitely exists for them. But it doesn't have to be one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think it's important to sort of expectation set for families when they, go on this journey. That there is an end point. We're not, it's not going to be we're constantly moving the goalposts and now you have to accomplish this for us to get out of your life. Because I think that's a frustration that families have, is that, they become DCF involved and it seems like they have to continually do this and this and this and meet these benchmarks and metrics so that they can say, oh, we're better now. We've healed and we're stable. And all families are going to experience some level of stress,
Exactly.
but it's making sure that they have those tools. I also think about some of the things that you were saying about involving the family in the decision and meeting the family where they are. That connects back to our Office of Family Voice. The idea of it's not what's wrong with the child, it's not what's wrong with the parent, but what happened. That's our resilience. So it all connects back to sort of all of the different programs and all of the different things that we've launched through DCF in the last, 3-4 years to really transform how we approach this as a system. So I think that's really impressive. And another thing that, we talked about, connecting back to our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Belonging, because we said that services are available to families that are culturally competent and are also maybe supports for families that may not meet that traditional nuclear model. It might be 2 moms, 2 dads. There might be a grandparent in the home. How do we support them in their needs as well?
Yeah. Well, I need to address the first part to add on to what you were saying before I move on to that next question, but even more so around families being able to move on, right, from their services with CPMP. That was really thoughtful also in the selection of some of our models, because as we were talking before on prevention, many of the models that we're choosing are what we would refer to as primary and secondary prevention, meaning outside of DCF, right, in the universe, right, of how those are implemented, they don't necessarily necessitate child welfare involvement, right? But the way we're implementing them here, they start out in that way. However, there will be a few models that we're standing up that the CPMP case doesn't need to stay open, right? It's not contingent on the family continuing to receive service. And so our hope is that they will continue to receive service from their community provider and finish that service and be able to move on. And CPMP, DCF doesn't have to be involved, right? So I needed just to add in that point because that is something that we spent a lot of time in identifying. So in some of the models that we're standing up, like Trey mentioned around supportive visitation services, exchange parent aid, and others, we've asked our community providers who are responding, right, to these RFPs to use data, right, to use needs assessments data to hear directly from the families that they're serving around what those needs might be and to match their curriculum, right, their parenting curriculum or other types of interventions to their communities. And so that has been a very intentional approach in this new RFP process. And we are in collaboration, right, with DEB. They have a nice acronym. We should just start using our FPR acronym. We've been in partnership with DEB to make sure that it really starts with the solicitation, to make sure that what we're putting out right into the universe in terms of purchasing, right, these models match, right, what the needs are of families, and that DEB is part of that process, right? And so for us, that means that they're providing us guidance, right, in what should be in that RFP, how we might ask questions of providers to really select the right providers, right? Because it really starts with how services are provided in the community, right? These are going to be out in the community. And so making sure that we have providers that are embedded in the community, that are connected, that have those partnerships, that can continue to support families beyond our support with them is really the most critical piece, right, at first of setting up these programs to be successful.
Yeah, and I think it's also about building trust with the families that we're working with, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're already sort of in a higher stress environment. This may be a family that does have DCP&P involvement, but they don't have to, so that's part of it. But they're experiencing some level of stressor that they're needing to work through the support of these programs. Having someone meet with them that, you know, the most basic is they speak the same language.
Right.
But, you know, that has some of that cultural experience as well, that understands, like, you know, when you're, you know, in an environment where, you know, grandma throws the chancleta, if you're like, how do we work through that to get to a better place of, you know, reunified and supported families? So I think that's super important.
New Jersey families are so diverse, right? We live in a state where so many families are bringing their experiences from places all over the world. And so I feel really lucky with our upcoming Exchange Parent Aid program that such a large piece of the model is parent matching, right? Like making sure, so first, right, in the agencies that are being selected, hiring from within the community that is being served, right? Looking for people who are going to come work for the agency and get partnered to provide that service that are from their community. Really share experiences, share upbringing, share values. And then, right, that really speaks to the success of that service. You know, you can relate more to the person that's in your home trying to help guide you.
You're making my transitions very easy, because my next question, and it's almost like we planned it this way.
I did.
But my next question was going to be about the Exchange Parent Aid program. I think that's our.
I read your mind.
Yeah, it's almost like we talked about this before. Yeah. But the Exchange Parent Aid program, this is probably the newest initiative being rolled out by FPR. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that is and what it's going to look like for families beyond just that parent matching component that you talked about.
Right. So Exchange Parent Aid is a model that we have been able to procure here for New Jersey. I really see it fitting the needs of it's a parent. It's not just a parent mentor, right? It's really, they are called parent aides. A referral will come in through CPMP. We also have the option with the model of a parent self-referring, and that was really built out of that survey that Daniela was referring to earlier. Parents wanted to have the opportunity to identify their own needs, so there will be an option for referrals from outside sources. So once the referral comes into the agency, this parent aid will be matched with the family, an assessment is really done, that conversation, information from CPMP to really identify what the needs are and create a plan to attend to those needs, right? And so the service is available for families for most successfully around 6 months. It can go up to 11 months. And it's done by weekly in the home context, right? That can be a couple times a week for about an hour, really to attend to what the family's experiencing at that time.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this particular model is staff could be paraprofessionals, they could be persons with lived experience, right? They could have a bachelor's, right? It was important for us to identify models that didn't have such rigidity around staffing structure, to make sure that the staff that are employed by the agencies are truly meeting, right, the community needs. But also we don't need all clinical programs, right? Sometimes you need a good mix of clinical and non-clinical services. And so this will be just that. It'll be a support. They're going to serve families with children up to the age of 17. And as part of some of the needs assessment data and what we all know, right, is concrete needs are really important. Right, so the program itself, from the parent aides, will be able to provide a lot of that guidance and support, very much around, family systems and parenting and, whatever else that might look like in terms of what the support may need in that particular family. But the model that we did, like a slight adaptation here in New Jersey, is that we added in a care manager to that model to really be able to attend to the various concrete needs that families have, right? And they should be able to provide and help with some transportation, right, to have access to the Board of Social Services or employment, or maybe they need to go to the pediatrician and that's where the visit's going to take place that day. And so that was a really important sort of adaptation that we decided to make here, which really speaks to back to what we were saying before, identifying models that would allow us the opportunity to do some of these things, right?
No, I think that's fantastic, and especially when we think about material needs of families, those are some of the biggest stressors that families are experiencing. The housing stock in New Jersey is hard to come by right now. Rents are through the roof. Transportation, we don't have the infrastructure in New Jersey for a strong mass transit system. You have to have a car. Right. So navigating all of those and being able to do that in sort of a supportive environment while you're taking the family to the pediatrician visit. It's almost like the carpool karaoke equivalent of services, of therapeutic services. But this other idea too, that it doesn't have to be clinical. It doesn't have to be connection to a licensed psychologist or a psychiatrist. Could help in some cases. But this idea of elevating lived experience feels like that's equity in action. That's us, honoring the wisdom of people that have been connected to our system, and also allowing them to use that earned experience, that earned wisdom, to support families. I think that's a fantastic a fantastic way of going with these services.
Yeah, and parenting is really hard. So it's very nice to have somebody who can be there, right? To sort of like tag team, like what have you done and what have you tried that has worked for you? And so, we're really excited about, the launch of the program, and it's the next sort of like stage, I guess I would say, in our continuum from FPS to offer this program. And there are more, right, that will be non-clinical, and, 1 or 2 clinical pieces of our models will pop up right over the next year or so.
So this last question, and again, these transitions are coming super smooth. I thank you for that.
Trying.
But my last question's for all three of you. Thinking about this evolution of the services that we provide. Previously it was, it was all siloed or, very disparate. Now it's all kind of connected through FPR. Previously there was, limited models. Now we're adding more models to it. But I'm wondering for each of you, how does the evolution of the services that your team is overseeing reflect the evolution of the work that we do as a department? I always end with the hard ones. So
It's easy and it's hard to do.
It feels perfect to
Yeah.
me. We in the field, right? When you're in CPMP, you're wondering, you're always wishing that you had a way to keep a family together, to support that family. You see the family for who they are, wanting to just do the best job for their children. Maintain everything that will keep their family moving forward. And so I'm beyond proud to be here in OFPR to create, to help support and create programs that give caseworkers and supervisors the opportunity to give that to their families, and also thinking about so many families that we've served over the years that now will have access to all of these programs. The agency is moving forward in such a way that it is very clear that the mission is to prevent child abuse and prevent children from going into out-of-home placement. This work is perfectly connected to that. Sorry.
And I'll jump in. So, in my area with servicing the out-of-home children, when you said silo, I said that was the perfect word, because with Visitation, it was as if every agency had, they were their own separate entities serving our families, and there was all this little silos, but now it's all going to be uniform. And so I think that's helping with the involvement of our agency. Like with the diversity and equity, we want everything to be seamless for our families. And with SVS, again, no matter where you are in the state, you're going to have the same opportunity to be serviced in the same way, whether therapeutic, supportive. Your family will get that. And I think that really speaks to that connection piece for the families that, we have evolved to. And just using our own words, safe, healthy, and connected. I see Visitation as doing just that, giving them that safe environment to maintain their healthy family relationships and be connected. So I just feel like Visitation is definitely on that evolution trail.
Bonus points for being on message.
And then, I think to both of your points, families want to have their children in their home, right? The intention was never to have foster care be a parenting system. Foster care, they don't raise children, right? Families raise children, and they should be at home, right, with their families. And I think in what we've heard from families and maybe in some of our own experiences, children want to be with their parents regardless of what has happened, right? Whatever that stressor or traumatic event is that has happened, if given the option, they would always want to be with their parents. And so I think just approaching the work in that way all the time and everything that we're doing, and being able to offer services when services are needed, right? Many times, like we said, most of our families are served in home, and it's issues of neglect and poverty and really just needing concrete supports. But where services are needed, right, where programs are needed, our hope here is that they'll be available, right, to families and appropriate for that particular family, and we're not putting a family that has a 17-year-old in a parenting program for 5-year-olds, right? And so the evolution here and sort of the latitude that we've been given is that we should be really examining the services that we're providing to families and making them better, right? And being able to offer services based on what we've learned from families over all these years, based on our own experiences. And so I feel really fortunate that we're entrusted to do this, right? That we have partners in the department that have come alongside of us to help us do this, and that we just feel really supported and excited, right? We have a wonderful team, and everybody, you do this work because it's meaningful for you. And so I feel confident that we have the right people to be able to do it, and that we work in a place that gives us the space to make this the priority.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me about the programs that you're offering through OFPR.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for all that you're doing for families, because this work, you take on this work because you're passionate for it, but you really are making a difference for families. You're helping them come back together when they need to come back together. You're helping them stay together when they need to stay together, and really that's exactly where our system needs to be. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us. Thank you.
So next month, we're putting on our party hats. We're going to have a little bit of a celebration. So the Division on Women will be here to talk about 50 years of service to women in New Jersey, and what does that look like in the 21st century? How have we evolved our work to support survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence, but also how are we empowering the next generation of girl leaders to take the mantle and to run with it, because that next generation is going to lead us so much further into transformation. But whether we're talking about supports for women, supports for families, it's all transformation, and we're happy to have you on board with this journey. So on behalf of the Office of Communications and Public Affairs and my producers, this is Jason Bukowski signing off, and tune in next month for more DCF on the Air.